Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, good morning to everybody. My name is Federica Matteoli. I'm from Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and it's a pleasure for me today to moderate this session, the opening session for the thematic date 1, watering for NDCs and NAPs. Today, our session will start with two presentations, and later with two keynotes from by Mr. John Matthews, Executive Director of the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, and Ms. Amanda McKee, Director for Knowledge and Learning NDCs Partnership. The session is live streamed with participants on site and online. And the participant, if you have any question, please write in the chat box. You know that water is important not only for drinking, but also because for agriculture we consume a lot of water to produce our food, and how we can improve the way we use water in agriculture to make the best out of the limited water resources is very important. And today our keynote speakers will explain what they are doing in this sense and what is the support that governments and civil society will give to the NDCs for achieving this goal. So let me give the floor to Mr. John Matthews, Executive Director of the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm really pleased to be here and to be addressing our audience here in person and abroad. What I'd like to be able to talk this morning about is one of the ways in which we have been able, over the last 3 years, a specific program to literally water the NDCs, the National Climate Planning processes that have been evolving over the past few years. NDCs, as a quick reminder, they were created by the 2015 Paris Agreement. They are the main structure and framework that we use to talk about climate commitments by countries. And they've really only come into effect in Glasgow, so just a couple of COPs ago. So when we're at the midpoint in the COP process. What I'm going to focus in on is something called the Water Tracker for National Climate Planning. It was launched at Glasgow, so we're in our 3rd year now and been working with a total of about 24 countries to date. For even our original set of 3 or 4 countries, we have been working with them continuously. And I also want to say I'm the front man today, but really this work has been led by a close colleague of mine, Kelsey Harpham, who is arriving at COP in a couple of days. So why water resilience, and what is water resilience? These are words certainly in this pavilion, but I think in many other parts of the COP you're going to hear these words come up a lot, and it's worth thinking a little bit about exactly what they might mean. So in AGWA, Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, we think about resilience as having 2 key components. One is that we want to prepare decisively for the climate impacts that we are certain that are going to happen. So things like sea level rise, increasing flood frequency and intensity, the loss of glaciers and snowpack. But there's so many aspects of the water cycle that are changing in ways that are hard to predict, that the climate models don't really tell us that much about. And so we also really need to be flexible. And that combination of being decisive and flexible, robust and flexible, is a really important point that we're trying to emphasize. And flexibility is new for most countries, for most decision makers. So why water resilience? It's really trying to transform treating water in isolation, just in health, or just in energy, or just in agriculture, or just in natural resource management, and saying we need to manage across projects, across sectors, and between those sectors too. And that commitments that we have maybe in one silo are going to have implications for other silos. This kind of shared vision of water, I think, is really critical. And treating water is a dynamic resource, one that is changing over time. So quick examples here. Most clean energy, carbon sequestration, and climate adaptation interventions intensify our water usage at the same time that the water cycle itself is more dynamic than it has been in the past. And this point has actually been really well made by the IPCC itself. They stated in IP Assessment Report 6 in 2022 that water-based adaptation should be the key of all adaptation projects. Very interesting observation. Infrastructure planning processes are often not designed to think about the future, how water may appear in the future. Mostly we're backward looking in how we do a lot of our design and planning processes. And we also need to think about where there are maybe new risks that we haven't experienced in the past, new kinds of storms or new types of climate events that haven't occurred. But we also need to not think about climate change as everything is bad. Actually, sometimes there are new types of impacts or patterns that are emerging that may be opportunities, and we should take advantage of them. So the water tracker, it's a name that came from one of our original donors, the UK Foreign Office, FCDO, said, how can a country set up the best enabling environment for water resilient climate action? And how can we connect projects and programs across sectors so that they see each other, that they're aware of each other, and they use water as this kind of common language for how they engage. We want to promote efficacy, but also ambition. And a nice quote from a great publication by Agua, EMI, and the Global Commission on Adaptation: if we can build resilience by managing water, we can move from a reactive defensive approach to imagining how we can thrive. Actually thinking about not just de-risking, but prosperity at a time of climate change. So the climate tracker is a tool. We tend to start with the NDC focal points, often the Ministry in Environment or Climate Change that serves as the house for the NDC. And we use them as a starting point to be able to engage with other kinds of ministries across the government. It is driven by the countries, their priorities. They tell us how to help them and what's most important to them. And actually, they come to us now. The water tracker is well enough known that they reach out directly to us. I literally have had people in past water pavilions walk up and say, we've heard about this, can you help us exactly on this? Most of our problems are water problems, and what we say is most of your solutions are also water solutions. And we tend to, in this first phase of the water tracker that's ending over the next couple of months, we started with national policies, then dropping down to ministerial programs, and then trying to modify and influence what happens at individual projects. In truth, most programs that focus on adaptation, they reverse that process. They start at the level of projects, and sometimes they stop there and, or try to trickle back up. Our idea is that from good programs will come good projects, and that we really need to strengthen that top and middle layer, and that means digging deep into many ministries. A couple of quick objectives. Promote a shared vision and understanding of water resilience across sectors, institutions, policy frameworks, and levels of governance. In the next phase of the water tracker, that's an area that we're very much moving into. It's a 37 million pound extension, new programming from the UK government that starts next year with a larger consortium to expand the water tracker and some of our parallel programs that was just announced yesterday. And we're very much in that phase. We're dropping down to cities, to companies, to thinking about what's happening in civil society and making sure that what's happening at the national level is also connected to what's happening at lower levels. We're trying to provide clarity in evaluating the ambition and efficacy of national climate planning and action. National climate planning should be in every ministry, not isolated in one. It needs to be fully integrated. And there's a whole value chain around water-sensitive investment, from looking at line ministries to say, a finance ministry. It should be actually part of the national priority setting, the national development plan. And finally, we know much of what I'm talking about is policy frameworks, but it gets nerdy really fast. One of our observations, say most recently from the country of Panama, they said, okay, we get it. None of us were water people. Now we know that water is our biggest priority. We don't know how to design a good project that does water. Can you help us with that process too? And so we move from the kind of senior decision makers down to the more technical people first. The key results, what I want to say is maybe the most important results. There are a lot of words that are on this slide, but I'm going to say the biggest result is that the countries keep saying, can you keep working with us? Actually, Costa Rica, another great country, they were kind of smug, if I can say that, about the water tracker. They said, we think you're going to tell us that we're doing everything right. And what they've done instead is they said, actually, we could do a lot better, and we're really missing a lot of things, and we didn't see where all the water was. Two quick experiences from Costa Rica. We've been able to work with the water tracker to enable us to make an assessment that will help us improve and align the different climate plans in Costa Rica and develop bankable, water-resilient projects and support our Paris commitments. While we work globally, quotes like this led the Inter-American Development Bank to say, we want to invest in this too. From good programming, we will have good projects that we can then fund. And from Nepal, the water tracker furthered the avenues to ensure needs of implementation are met, such as capacity, technology, and financing to achieve national and international commitments on mitigation and adaptation. These are basic things, but this is the only tool that we're aware of globally that works on NDC and adaptation and resilience issues. Full stop, not just water. Next step, I've already talked a little bit about this kind of drop from trying to coordinate from national level to subnational levels. That's the conversation that's really missing at the moment, and it's one that I'm hoping really launches with this COP. One of the big events here is the GST, the Global Stocktake. How are we doing in NDCs? Not a big surprise. We have a lot more work to do. The water tracker is clearly part of that solution. It has been identified by the UNFCCC itself as one of those. And I think actually we're going to see the biggest dividends in the second round of NDCs that'll be launched in 2 years. Thank you very much. I'm really grateful for your time, and I welcome your questions and comments later.
Do you have any questions for clarification? Just for clarification, because we will have questions at the end. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Just an announcement that after the next presentation, we will test you with 2 questions online. So be aware and ready with your cell phone. The next presenter is Miss Amanda McKee, Director for Knowledge and Learning NDCs Partnership. She will share with us NDCs Explorer and the Toolbox. Amanda?
So I'm just going to connect here and do a live demo. All right, so as said, I'm going to share 2 tools with you, and I think this will really nicely complement what John just walked us through, because in addition to the work that Agua is doing with the water tracker, there's a lot of tools out there to help countries address specific areas of how to incorporate water into NDCs. So on the NDC Partnership website, we help to draw together the different tools and resources that our members and other partners have put together. So we have over 200 members, 120 country members, developed, developing, and then close to 100 institutional and associate members, many of whom are in the room today. So the resources I'm going to show you are coming from those members directly. And I want to start with our climate toolbox, which is really a collection of tools, guidance documents, checklists, platforms, advisory support on anything that has to do with NDCs, from the planning stages to the implementation to the financing of them. And the idea here, and let me just reset this, the idea here is that it's an easy place to dive in to understand what's available out there and how it can support you. So we have close to 1,000 resources that are in this toolbox. You can filter by the activity type, and we've broken these down from anywhere from really understanding the basics of what an NDC is, through the various steps that you might go through in planning and establishing the institutional arrangements, collecting data, really all the way down to financing, evaluating, monitoring, and reporting impacts. We also have different focus areas that you can search for. So you can search for resources specific to a region, a country grouping, a sector or theme, and also if you're a non-technical expert, for instance, we have specific filters to actually parse through the resources so that you're not being thrown something that's a modeling tool when in fact you wouldn't actually be able to engage with that. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples here, but if you go to sectors and themes, and we can filter by water, and you can see we went from close to 1,000 resources to 46 resources now specific on water. From there, you could apply any other additional filters, and it'll further narrow down those results for you. The other thing that you can do is use the word search as well. And so even if you're not sure within the filters what you're looking for, use the word search. So let's say I'm looking specifically at the nexus between water and food systems. If I type in food systems here and search there, I'm now down to 3 results that are very specific to what I'm looking for. So with any of the results, we can click on that. It'll bring us to more information, a description, all of the tags that have been applied to that resource, but then more importantly, a link to actually go and access that resource as well. We've also put in place a function within the toolbox that it will suggest similar tools for you as well. So the opportunity is you can try to find what you're looking for, but also maybe get some inspirations on some other tools that are open to you. Going back to the toolbox, just one last thing that I would mention, you could also search here, for instance, if you were looking for resources from a particular partner. So if we wanted to see, for instance, I know Agua, they're doing stuff on water. What kind of resources do they have? And here we can find the water tracker, for instance. So our hope is that this will be an important tool for countries as they're working on the next round of NDCs to really understand how you can think about these different topics and incorporate them into your, not just updating process of the NDC, but actually thinking through to the implementation, to the financing of it. So that's the toolbox. I want to also show a second tool, which is at a completely different scale, and this is the Explore NDC Content tool. And this is something that has been developed jointly with Climate Watch, hosted through the World Resources Institute. But this is really a tool that's grounded in countries' NDCs. So the data set behind this tool is the actual NDCs themselves. They've all been transcribed and tagged according to a set group of indicators. And so what that means is that you can actually, starting from this global map where we can see that there are 178 parties that have submitted a new or an updated NDC, we can start to narrow in on that. So if we wanted to say, for instance, which countries have incorporated water in their NDCs and understand that, we could actually look at, under categories, we can go to, let's say, sectoral adaptation measures. And then under the specific indicator, we can actually scroll down and search specifically for water. And so what you can see on the screen here is that map has changed considerably. The legend of what you're seeing is on the left-hand side of the screen. So I'm going to start at the bottom, but what we're seeing is that 99 parties, so those in yellow, have some sort of sectoral measure specified on water within their NDCs. And so quickly you can get a sense of who those countries are. You can click on any of these countries in the map, and it will actually bring you to a full detailed page, which I'll show you in a moment. You can also see there's 34 countries that have no specified measure. And so this, for us and for our members, is critically important because it shows where some of those opportunities are to work with countries and to bring these different elements into their NDC and look at it as an opportunity to raise the ambition. You can also see the vulnerability of the country and also the GHG emissions. And so interestingly, for analysis purposes, sectoral measures, those 99 parties, they make up almost half of the emissions of global emissions reflect some sort of water element. If we look on the vulnerability side, you can see that those countries who include water in their NDC tend to have higher median vulnerability. So this is something that we would expect, but it's also a really interesting tool to be able to dig into some of those details. So the last thing I wanted to show is if you actually narrow down to a country. So if we go to Ethiopia as an example here, what you're seeing is a summary of the NDC. This is their updated NDC, so submitted in 2021. We've got a quick summary of what the targets in the NDC look like overall. But then we can actually dive into the details. So we could go to the full text and read it. It has a great word search function that'll bring you directly to highlighted text. But we also have a series of indicators that allow you to look at in a more structured way. And this actually allows for comparison across NDCs, what countries are including and what their ambition looks like in those respects. So if we go to sectoral information under Ethiopia's NDC, and we go to, again, adaptation commitments here, we can scroll down to water and actually see exactly what's referenced in their NDC on water. And so we can see it's referenced in terms of health, so increasing the proportion of households with safe water supply. So that's how the country is addressing water in their NDC. So it's giving you that additional information. Where there are costs, where there's a specific target, you'll find that referenced in here as well. So I'm not going to go through more features, but would really encourage you to take a look at this. You can compare across countries. You can also compare across NDCs. So if you wanted to look at a country's first NDC versus their updated NDC and see how they've changed different things, how they've approached it to build on that. So I'm actually going to stop there. But as I said, really encourage you to take a look and happy to take any questions later.
Thank you, Amanda. Do you have any question to clarify some point, or we can go? Okay, so the question, we will have the questions at the end of the other presentation. So now it's time for you to answer some questions. Please, can we have the questions and the multimeter code on the screen? So I think your presentations were very, very important, especially to identify some key elements when we talk about NDCs, especially partnerships. So I'm always, I believe that partnership is an important element in many, many situations. So Virgin is my colleague in FAO in Rome, And Virgin, can you share your screen, please?
I don't have a possibility to share my screen yet. So if
Okay.
you could please give me access, that would be great. Thank you.
So after these questions for you, we will have 4 presenters to answer some questions, 2 rounds of questions on the role of organizations in the water activities involving NDCs and NAPs. And the second question related to cross-sectoral trade-offs needing consideration. So they will answer these questions that are very important. So, okay, do you have any useful tools? This is the question. Do you have any useful tools you recommend for greater integration of water in NDCs and NAPs? Do you have your... Did you share the code and everything for the cell phone? Virgin?
The code is on the top of the slide.
Sorry, I cannot see very well. Okay,
It's
yeah.
3894-1561.
Okay. Are you connected? Are you answering? Good.
So I'm just repeating the code in case someone cannot really see it. I notice it seems quite small from the screen here. So the code is 3894-1561. And you need to go to menti.com. So once you have answered the first question, then you can access directly the second question.
We don't have the answers.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Just
No. Just I'm watching the monitor, so I'm figure out the answers.
Well, there is no right and wrong answer. Huh?
Yeah,
Please just
I know.
share your ideas.
So we have just one response, the NSH principles, providing best practices of nexus approaches. Okay, good. Later we can go to the first question later.
Yeah, let me check because I wanted to show you the last, the answer for the second question. Let's see. Okay, so maybe I can reshare my screen now.
So do you have any useful tools you recommend for greater integration of water in NDCs and NAPs? So, okay, good. We have just 2 presentations from Amanda and John related to the very good tools to use. And this is Partnership Climate Toolbox, of course, what Amanda presented. So, okay, Virgin, do you have the second The answer for the second question? Yes, okay. Focus on invest. So apart the DNSC principle and providing best practices of Nexus approaches, we have a focus on investment needs from the beginning. Of course, the financial support need to be identified from the beginning, yes. So let me start with the second session of presenter. Thank you very much, Virginie. Thank you. And thank you very much to all of you. Now we have four presenters. Marcin Machilla is there. Are you there? Yeah. We have a Li Fang from FAO. David Abart-Coleman. Okay, we have a David Abart-Coleman, Senior Program Manager, Water Cooperation and Diplomacy Department. He is online. We have here, we have a Li Fang. I don't know if my colleague, Li Fang, Director Land and Water Division at FAO, is not yet connected. Tim Wainwright. Yeah, good. Come here. Chief Executive UK, Waterhead. And we have Marcin Machil is not here. Okay, so we can start with David and Tim. Thank you very much to be here. Actually, I would like to, you have 5 minutes to answer the first question. What are your institution's ongoing water activities involving NDCs and NAPs, and what good practices could you recommend out of these activities? Tim, do you want to start? Thank you very much.
By all means, yes. Thank you very much indeed. And before I start, I wanted to say a big thank you to everybody involved in organizing this. We're at WaterAid, we're delighted to be co-hosting today along with WWF US and the FAO. So thank you very much. And then I just wanted to say a few things just to put the whole thing in context before moving on to answering your question directly about what it is that WaterAid has been doing in this area. So I'm going to pick an example, actually. I was just looking this up on Wikipedia. What would we do without Wikipedia? So I'll just read this out to you. So from the 14th of June until October 2022, floods in Pakistan killed 1,700 people and caused lots of damage, very expensive. And it was caused by monsoonal rains, melting glaciers, which had followed an extreme heat wave, and all of this was attributed to climate change. And then it goes on to say a state of emergency was declared. It was the deadliest flood since 2020 in that region of the world. And it was also recorded as the costliest natural disaster, one of the costliest natural disasters in world history. So then I think a little bit back to what happened there. And WaterAid has been working in Pakistan for a long time. And one of the things that happened, oh yes, sorry, there was one other detail which is very interesting in the Wikipedia thing. It says the causes: heavy monsoonal rain, climate change, and poor urban planning. Okay? You see why I'm mentioning this, right? And we were very involved. In fact, we were very high profile in the emergency response, which is unusual because we're normally a long-term development organization. But if we're working in a place where a natural disaster happens, as we were in Pakistan, then we do things. But the other reason we did a lot of work is because access to clean water became a really critical part. I think it was the biggest part of the humanitarian response. Many different agencies worrying about this. So you might think that's a bit odd because actually they had a lot of water, right? They had too much water, so why was there a problem with drinking water? And one of the key reasons is because of that issue about poor urban planning, and in particular, sanitation. So if you don't have well-designed, safe sanitation systems in place, and then you get flooding, then you get contamination of all of your water sources. And then you have major risks. So not just the risk of being killed by the flood, but then there are major health risks associated with that. And that's what we saw happening in Pakistan, at the heart of a major natural disaster that was caused by climate change. So I give this as an example of this is what we are talking about here. We're talking about the fact that climate change affects human beings principally through water, too much or too little. We're in the middle of a COP, and this is the third COP that's had water featured. It's the third year that we've had a water pavilion, 20-odd years of COPs, yeah? And still the agenda is principally focused on trying to slow down climate change. It's principally focused on mitigation. Well, what is encouraging about this COP, I think, is that there is more and more attention now being played to, well, actually, okay, we're going to try and keep the world on 1.5 degrees, but we are also going to have to deal with the changes that are already happening, like in Pakistan, like in many other countries in the world. And at WaterAid, we see the impact of climate change in every country we're working in, different ways. But sea level rising in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, and all over the place, extremes of weather. So either flooding, but also drought. And all of this is making the need for... So it does two things. It makes it more difficult to provide resilient water, sanitation, and hygiene. But it also makes it more important to provide resilient water, sanitation, and hygiene. Because how can a community be resilient to climate change if it doesn't have access to such basic things? How can you survive a heat wave if you don't have water to drink? You know, what happens to the women who fetch water if there's a heat wave? The water's even more needed. But imagine how much harder it becomes if there's extreme temperatures. So that's why this matters. And the NDCs and NAPs sit at the heart of connecting these issues in the government's policy frameworks. And it's the mechanism that funders look to identify the priorities for funding this. And at the moment, there's quite a lot of mention of water in these documents. People do talk about water in the context of climate change, but there is very little attention paid to water management and actually the practicalities of what you do, for instance, in Pakistan, to provide a resilient, well-designed urban infrastructure that is less likely or unlikely to have a sanitation problem if there's flooding, right? That's what you want. So that's why this conversation is really, really important and vital in every country of the world, particularly the poorest countries in the world where the biggest impact is being seen, and the countries actually that did the least to cause this problem. And now I'm going to answer your question. So for WaterAid, this is a big part of our work in many of the countries in which we're operating. We work in close partnership with government. And I'll just give you a few examples. So a few years ago, we did some work on we supported a Pan-African Climate Justice Network. It was looking at the countries of Zambia, Uganda, Tanzania, Nigeria, and Rwanda. And then that produced some very useful initial reports that sort of scoped the problem. And then we're now following up, commissioning studies at national level in those countries to directly contribute to the development of NDCs and NAPs. And then across in Asia, in the country of Bangladesh, which of course, as I mentioned earlier, faces a very serious situation with rising sea levels and salination of water sources, so that the water basically becomes undrinkable. And in fact, a colleague of mine just returned recently, and she'd visited a location where we had 4 boreholes serving a community in the coastal region of Bangladesh. All 4 had become unusable. So WaterAid had developed a new piped-in source of water from 8 kilometers away from that community, and already we are seeing salt in that water too. Now, it's not yet, it's still usable, but it's going up. And a lot of these situations are very, I think David mentioned it earlier, it's not well understood. Nobody quite knows what's going to happen next. And how bad it is and how quickly it's going to evolve. So this is really urgent work. Anyway, in Bangladesh, we've been very busy engaging with government, multiple ministries, looking at the appropriate water resilience to put in place across NDCs and NAPs. And we were really delighted when the Bangladesh government published their first national adaptation plan with a really good inclusion of water, sanitation, and hygiene. So I hope that answers the first question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I leave the floor to David Abbott-Coleman, Senior Program Manager, Water Cooperation Diplomacy Department. David, the question is clear. What good practices could you recommend out of these activities that you are doing with your organization?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having me here today. I'm looking outside as it's a very snowy day here in Vienna compared to the temperatures that you're facing there. So for better or worse, I've looked at virtually all of the NDCs, the enhanced NDCs and the initial ones. And I've more specifically looked at about 125 NDCs from low and middle income countries. And from that, there are a number of trends that I think need to be taken on board in terms of the next round of NDCs and including in what we do in the sector. So the good news was, yes, there was much more water, absolutely. But thinking about what John was saying earlier about water resilience and the need for flexibility, robustness, I would also add coordination or integration into that list as well. And that is where I feel that a lot of the NDCs didn't do such a good job. Like in many ways, John also mentioned this project-led approach where they were sort of aggregating projects up. And you can kind of see this in the NDCs. And I've actually been working with a couple of countries on their NDCs, including the preparation and in terms of the implementation. And it's very clear that a lot of the ministries are not talking to each other as well as they could, but also that that many of them are more interested about the mitigation because that's the main thing still that is able to be measured and viewed in some ways, whereas adaptation is a bit harder. So there's a real lack of, dare I say, coordination. Like for example, countries might list a number of water disasters as probably happening, and yet the measures that they include don't necessarily respond to that. There's not necessarily very much coordination between different sectors that rely on water. And so this is the sort of trend that you're seeing. I think this is one of the things that as a community we need to take aboard in terms of the next round of NDCs. And so in terms of seaweed, we have some, I guess, direct NDC activities and what I would call indirect NDC activities. And the direct NDCs, includes, publishing guides on interactions between different water sector users. We've been working directly with some countries. We've also had work with Agua a little bit. They're doing water tracker in one of the countries that I'm operating in. So that's the direct, but there's also this indirect, and it's what I feel is the important thing is how do we connect things such as what Tim just mentioned, WASH and the rest of the water and climate. So we've been doing work on climate-informed WASH. We've done water demand management, which is trying to connect multiple different sectors. We have the source to sea tool, which is trying to look at how do you connect things from source to sea in terms of multiple sectors and users. Yesterday, I think in the pavilion, there was speakers from Indigenous peoples. What are some of the lessons and the principles that we can learn from them in terms of applying a connected, integrated approach? Because water resilience requires that. So a lot of the work that I think CIWI does tends to be around connecting different sectors. We've got water smart forest landscape restoration. We've been doing enhanced green water investment in terms of agriculture and water. So I think it's for us, it's working in those in-between spaces to connect and integrate and coordinate different sectors. So would be my response to your first question.
Thank you.
It's weird seeing yourself on the center of the screen, I tell you.
Thank you, David, especially for the last point that we need to be connected all together to solve this problem and to manage better our resources at the natural level, to what we can learn from each other, especially what the governments can learn from indigenous peoples, from research, and what research can learn from government. So working together is the key, is the element to try to solve these kind of issues. So let me leave the floor to our director, Li Feng, Director Land and Water Division at FAO. Li Feng, the question is, what are your institutions' ongoing water activities involving NDCs and NAPs? And what good practices could you recommend out of these activities?
Thank you very much. Very good morning to all of you from Rome. I think within FAO, we have been trying to work on this matter from, let me say, three categories over 3 levels. First foremost, FAO, as the institution, we already developed a corporate level climate change strategy. And following that, we also work with member countries, develop a specific action plan, try to address water in adaptation, through the adaptation and also mitigation perspective, which is a very becoming corporate level and a priority that we collaborate with all the member countries. The second level specifically, we have been supporting the countries in their effort to develop a water-wise adaptation plan or mitigation plans in specific sectors, especially in the fishery, in the forestry, and in the agriculture sector. FAO is also accredited entity to the Green Climate Fund, and through the partnership with the Green Climate Fund, we have been helping the countries to access the readiness funding. So through the GCF's readiness funding to support dozens of countries to help them to develop specific adaptation plans in all the related sectors, as I mentioned, such as the forestry, fishery, agriculture, and also in certain countries on biodiversity. Third level is really specific actions and interventions in the field, on the ground, together with the partnership of all the countries. For example, to select much more drought-resilient crops, and then help the countries to figure out how we can collectively to promote those drought-resilient crops, in the future. So certainly, the adaptation has been, key in many of the projects in the agriculture sector, broadly speaking, and have to deliver both the adaptation benefit, help the communities to strengthen their capacity, and also promote sustainable solutions to increase resilience. At the same time, to have the community to be able to improve agriculture productivity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Li Feng Li. Thank you very much to all of you. The second question, please respond in 2-3 minutes. I know this question will need more than 2-3 minutes, but be brief. So, do you think, team, is there any cross-sectoral trade-offs needing consideration, or specific financing aspects for integration of water in NDCs and NAPs?
Sure, yeah, thank you very much indeed. Yes, well, I kind of touched on this in the first response when I talked about the fact that you need this good urban planning, So clearly this is not, What you do not want is you do not want this to be entirely within the water ministry and not connected to other ministries. So there is clearly a need to look at how climate change affects the entire country and the impact on different sectors. But I think you will find that there is a water impact on everybody, because this is how the climate change manifests itself in terms of the impact on people. So that means that you need engagement with the health ministry, with the education ministry, with the urban planning ministry, or the relevant, the names will vary according to the country, right? And then in terms of the financial side of it, which you also asked about, perhaps just one thing to highlight is that a recent piece of work that we did, both WaterAid and working with the Resilient Water Accelerator, which is an initiative that we have been helping to start up, which is about engaging with the private sector and bringing the private sector to bear out, working in partnership with public sector funding, blended finance solutions. But the piece of work there identified a potential $500 billion potential benefit in added value from water solutions. So, and I think that the reason behind this is that if you make investments in resilience to climate change, create resilient water solutions, resilient sanitation systems, and so on, you will be realizing value because you are preventing cost occurring, like the illustration I gave in my first answer in relation to flooding in Pakistan and how costly that was, and part of that being because of the issues around lack of a resilient sanitation system. So I hope that helps to answer the question.
Sure.
I think that was
2
to 3 minutes.
No, yeah. Thank you. You are making a very good point, especially the key message is preventing. This is the key message. If we finance activities related to water, we prevent many issues and problems, not only for, let me say, human life, but also for nature, for social and economic issues.
Absolutely, yes, and it's the nature, water, it's indistinguishable. Nature is looking after water, storing it, purifying it, and so on. So, and a lot of the resilience investments that need to be made will be very positive for nature.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. David, same question for you. Thank you.
So, given the nature of my earlier intervention, I think like Tim is, it's not so much about different special cross sectors, it's the coordination and integration across the whole. And I think I would differentiate between high-level integration and lower-level integration. The water tracker for me is something that's at a high-level coordination and integration. It's trying to cross the whole of government at multiple tiers. Now, when it came to the NDCs, many of countries included what I'd call lower level integration, whether it was within a sector such as integrated water resource management, or whether it was basin plan at a subnational level. And so a lot of the NDCs didn't do such a good job of connecting those lower level pieces of integration into the bigger plan. And so I think a lot of our work needs to go into how do we create more high level integration. And some of the things that I think would be useful in that would be to develop a series of principles to be applied across a lot of the NDCs that would help countries think about that high level of integration of water, such as water resilience. What does that mean, and how should you account for that within different sectors or different levels of governance? The second would be measures that explicitly connect outcomes in one sector to the needs of another. There's not enough of that type of thinking going through the different NDCs. The measures that are designed to be coordinated, landscape restoration has multiple benefits for mitigation, for adaptation, etc. So how do we have principles that reflect that within the next NDCs to try and also get the ministries to work together not just produce their list of projects or programs and then get somebody to put them into a big document, because this is what often happens, is that a lot of the different ministries will put together their list of what they think they need to do in terms of building, reacting and responding to climate change, but not necessarily thinking about what other sectors need. So agriculture, energy, water, other users, ecosystems, there's not enough coordination in that respect and integration. So having a series of principles that can then be included within the NDC and help guide what goes into it, because the 125 NDCs that I had are vastly different to each other. And I think that's, the only thing they have in common is that there's supposed to be more ambition. How do we enable that ambition around coordination and integration is, I think, an important move. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you very much, David. This is a very key element. Also, principle, identify where we are and what we want to do to achieve this goal and the solutions for these issues. Dr. Lee, same question for you. So what are cross-sectoral trade-offs meaning at consideration or specific financing aspect for integration of water in NDCs and NAPs? What FAO is doing on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Certainly, they are trade-offs, especially if we look at water allocation at the local level, at the national level, especially at the basin water resource allocation plans. And those trade-offs, we're basically talking about how much water could be allocated to all the different sectors, how much water could be used. At the same time, then a certain amount of water should be reserved for the river system to keep the freshwater ecosystems in the healthy status, and so as to achieve so-called environmental flows. So certainly there are trade-offs. However, if we could be smarter, really to promote all the technologies and innovations and efficiencies to improve water use, certainly those trade-offs will be turned into a much positive connectivities and mutual benefits, certainly in countries that we actively supporting the countries to improve water use efficiency. And through that effort, certainly agriculture has been used much less water, and the water saved then could be reallocated to other sectors or to secure the environmental flows. And we see certain thirsty crops, especially like the maize, sugar canes, and rice, by improving water use efficiency, then simply about 1/3 of water could be saved, and that's a huge contribution to the potential water need of other sector, or to be saved in the river systems to secure environmental flows. And certainly we looking forward much more integration, as being mentioned by David and the other first panelists. I could give you one specific example. If you remember that in the year 2021, through the UN Food System Summit, then 115 countries developed their national food security pathways. And recently, our division reviewed all these national level food security pathways. And it's totally surprised to us that only 1/3 of those food security pathways mentioned water meaningfully. So that means even the rest of 70% of the countries, even many of them they are water scarce countries facing significant water scarcity and drought challenges, and they didn't mention water in their food security pathways. So this is one of the examples. That's why FAO we have been trying to find a way to really to bring the water into the food sector and to promote the cross-sectoral collaboration. FAO is also very active in promoting the NDCs, especially in the sector of fishery, forest, and agriculture. We also support many countries to develop their national biodiversity strategies and action plans. And start from early this year, we also providing both technical and financial support to the countries to develop national water roadmaps towards SDGs. So we hope within FAO, we try to bring all these teams together, make sure that our technical support to the countries in all these national planning and really talk to each other and encourage all the sectors to come together to develop a holistic and integrated planning at the national level. Recognizing such a huge gap, that's why FAO also is partnering together with others to make sure that, because broadly speaking, water is so invisible in the UNFCCC process. So that's why we are launching a new partnership on the 10th of December, started with the high-level ministerial dialogue, but then launch a new partnership that we can work together with NDC partnership with a couple of other institutions that we can provide the support to the countries to make sure that in their NDCs, in their NARPs, that water will be much better included for the next iteration of the national climate planning process. I think that's a few things. Certainly, yes, we have to look at the trade-offs, but we really want to find ways to help the countries to, especially the different sectors, to come together to find holistic and integrated solutions from planning to programming to specific interventions on the ground level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you very much for your work. I think also this is another element that I want to put on the table: a holistic approach. An holistic approach that also John, Tim, the other Amanda raised this element. So only all together we can achieve this goal. We can solve the problem. So Tim, do you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to agree, a similar point really. I just wanted to agree with Li Laifeng's point about the need for basically, I think this is a bigger issue than only the NDC NAP thing. It's about good water governance, which is about moderating the use between different sectors. And if I may give another example, so there was a lot of media attention on Cape Town a few years ago, the sort of day zero, and Cape Town's going to run out of water. And it's true, and a lot of focus on that being related to a drought. Yeah. But actually, the agriculture sector had exceeded their quotas for year after year after year. And there had been no penalties. So it was a governance failure that created a weakness and a vulnerability that a drought then led to a very serious situation where people were going to run out of water.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to strongly agree with the point he was making about this need for management, good management by government, regulating the amounts that different sectors use.
And we can do only if we work together, research, civil society, economic level. So I would like to open the floor if you have any questions for our presenters. Yeah, young lady. Yeah, sure.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this panel. I'm Telsa Mikaush from the Center for International Sustainable Development Law. And it was really emphasized that governance was important, that high-level cooperation was extremely important within countries. We haven't talked about the collaboration between countries and the fact that water often is shared. So what are the best practices around the world that could serve as models? What is needed at the legal level as well to strengthen transboundary water cooperation? Thank you very much.
Thank you. John, do you want to answer?
Thank you so much. Should I?
Yeah.
Maybe Amanda, do you want
can.
to? Okay.
Yeah, Amanda, please.
That's a fantastic question. Tessa, is that? Telsa. Okay. Okay. Great. I would actually say that your question about how we're thinking about adaptation and resilience issues across borders is quite a new question. It shouldn't be a new question, but it is, especially because water, in Agua's sensibility, Agua is really the medium of resilience. It's the way that we actually are implementing and conceiving and acting on effective resilience. And so what we've been talking about here is the way that the UNFCCC has defined climate action, which is at a national level through NDCs. But water, of course, is an intensely transboundary resource. I love the idea that Bangladesh has something like 70 transboundary rivers. And I think something like 60% of the countries in Africa have transboundary rivers. So like this transboundary element is really profound and important. What I'm hoping actually happens are kind of two things. One is that we have more regional adaptation that's occurring anyway, that there are countries that are starting to work together on that level. I was contacted, for instance, by a member of the Canadian government a few days ago, working in Nunavut, which is the newest province in Canada. It's in the far north. It's an Inuit majority province. And they are just creating their first provincial climate adaptation program, and they're trying to figure out how to share water resources with the U.S. In Alaska, and also with other provinces in the area. And when such rapid climate change, that's actually like a really critical issue for them to get together. They were asking me, like, what are the best practices for that? And I said, it's mostly aspiration. We don't have a lot of examples. But it is intensely relevant for other issues too. I would actually say that much of the conflict, the kind of deep, multi-decade, potentially multi-century decade a conflict that we're seeing in places like the Levant, say between the region around the Jordan River, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Israel, much of that conflict is expressed through water. And there are some fantastic groups like EcoPeace Middle East that they're amazing. And one of their suggestions has been to create a regional NDCP or NDC. Sorry, and I think it's a brilliant and wonderful idea. And I hope that there is support through the UNFCCC processes to go that route.
I don't know I don't have great knowledge of the transboundary issues. I understand them, and I know that they're important. The thing I observe, though, is that they are intensely political. And so the only comment I would make is I think it's really important not to try to deal with everything in one go. And I think I completely agree with your points about, yes, it needs space on the agenda and so on, but don't allow it to slow down progress on the NDCs, which should be more straightforward to progress than some of these very, that go back centuries. Yeah.
Okay, and David?
Yeah, just to also say, having worked with a couple of countries on the preparation of the NDC, there will need to be resources made available for this, because at times they struggle to coordinate amongst their own ministries, let alone having an NDC and then having conversations with neighbouring countries about it. So I think there will need to be something like some, say, summits of countries to describe the contents of their NDC, which may be less political, but it'll be after they've been published, but to enable, because we have to look ahead what is necessary for the next time. So there will need to be some resources made available for it, because at the moment, a lot of countries struggle to actually coordinate within their own territory, amongst the ministries, let alone have that conversation with the next. So it would need to be some sort of dedicated program, I think, to do that. We work quite a lot at CIWI with transboundary programs, and yes, they are intensely political, but with published NDCs, there may be the opportunity to create the conditions for the next round of prior conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other question from the floor for our panelists? No, really? From online? Any question? Do you have any question in the chat? No. Okay.
There's 2 chats.
Yes, but I suppose are not questions, right? Okay, good. Let me wrap up what we have listened from.
Could I just add something?
Sorry?
Just before we leave.
Yeah,
One
David.
of the things we haven't talked about here is mitigation.
Yeah.
And that is one of the big areas. And so it hasn't really come up in this conversation, but of course, mitigation, a lot of mitigation activities are highly reliant on water, or they could have a significant impact on the water resource and the hydrological services. So I think this is the other aspect that needs to come through the next round of NDCs. Like CIWI working with GIZ and Potsdam Institute did this report on water and mitigation, but actually translating that into principles that can be utilized within the next round of NDCs. You know, John mentioned water resilience. Well, maybe the next round should commit to water resilience, define what that means, and have a number of principles within the document that actually helps to really embed water within the NDC process. Thank you.
Yes, it's an interesting point to make. It's quite nice to have a conversation which has left out mitigation, because it's normally the other way around. You have a mitigation conversation that leaves out adaptation. I think we should be careful, because we need the world to live with climate change as well as, and a lot of the countries that are most affected are not emitting very much, and didn't emit it very much, and therefore haven't really caused this problem. And therefore, it would be unjust to limit their ability to adapt by focusing on the mitigation side of water. However, I think in most cases, there are mitigation benefits to the kind of resilient interventions that we're talking about. And I give a couple of tangible examples. If communities have access to drinking water, they don't need to boil it. And you know, you do get quite significant emissions from like firewood and so on used to clean water. A second one, well-managed sanitation emits less methane. And methane, as we all know, is a very dangerous greenhouse gas. It's actually a lot worse than carbon, and a focus of other major conversations this week. But I don't think that should be the reason we do this. I think the main reason we do this is because communities need access to resilient water services, and they have a right to expect that.
Thank you very much, Tim, for this clarification. We have another question, actually, from the floor.
Thank you. Ruth Matthews from CIWI, and also the coordinator for the Action Platform for Source-to-Sea Management. So the question I want to bring forward is, obviously, I think we're all water experts here, and so we recognize that there's a water cycle that includes not just fresh water, but the ocean. And so I'm curious how you're addressing that connectivity across the entire water cycle in the tools that you're doing, the engagements that you're having. How are you bringing the ocean and its role in both climate production, let's say, and resilience?
Thank you. Would you like to answer this question?
I've spoken a lot, so no one else wanting to come in. Okay. Well, I speak as a representative of an organisation that mostly focus on the sort of what's sometimes called little water, the people end of water. But I do think that the two sides, the water space needs to be well integrated. It's not okay to, if you're a WASH organisation, to just assume that if you dig a deep enough hole, then you'll get fresh water and you can drink it, and that's the end of the conversation. And it's also not okay, if you're focused on the quality of a river, to think if you've cleaned up the river, that the communities living by the river will get access to clean water, because that, again, is not. So we need good collaboration between the organizations that specialize in these different areas. And I think, and I think it's very, very much linked. I mean, the thing that immediately came to my mind, a few weeks ago, I was in the city of Lagos, which is disposing of sewage into the lagoon with potentially very calamitous impact on, well, I think already quite serious impact on the natural environment around Lagos, and indeed on the sea nearby. So a lot of this is mutually beneficial. Well-managed water and sanitation will have a positive impact on the natural environment, and a better natural environment will have a positive impact on the ability of those of us focused on the people end of water to deliver resilient water solutions.
Thanks so much, and thanks, Ruth, for your question. I think that actually these issues around maybe some of our decisions, are both for climate mitigation and for climate adaptation, that are happening on the surface of the land through the lens of freshwater resources, are actually having pretty profound interactions with near coastal and with marine systems. Good example that's not too far from here is the Red Sea. That desal systems actually there are beginning to influence the salinity of the Red Sea. That's actually quite disturbing. That the production and conversion of salt water into potable fresh water is altering at such a massive scale freshwater ecosystems, that there's a huge risk there, I would say, for trying to work through these risks in an unthoughtful way. And I think that's going to increase quite a bit in places like the Mediterranean, probably a lot of middle and upper income countries in the Americas too. Certainly small island states, I think it could be a significant risk. I'll also, as another point, that it's more of a near coastal issue, especially in estuaries, is how we're thinking about flows. My longtime colleague Li Feng was mentioning about water for ecosystems, especially for rivers. As an aside in his talk, well, when you again, to think about salinity in near shore systems, what modulates salinity there? It's actually the flow of fresh water, and that we often really need to think about our role in how we influence the flows of fresh water when they meet an estuary or a bay or even a kind of a near shore system that has a really profound impact on the ecosystems. And as an extension, the livelihoods, the local economies that are in that space, and being able to manage inland flows for nearshore ecosystem quality and livelihood quality is a really important kind of adaptation gap, I would say, and how we're trying to think. Because those flows are changing, our use of the water that alters those flows is changing, and then those ecosystems along the shore themselves are quite dynamic. So it's really, it's dancing with three partners there, and that doesn't work out very well in most cases. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Director Lee.
Thank you very much for the question from Ruth. And just to continue with the input by John Matthews, I could give you a specific example. That's the case for the for the exterior area of the River Zambezi. And you probably know that in the exterior area of the Zambezi in Mozambique, millions of people really rely on the shrimp production at the coastal area. However, the shrimp production is so much rely on the amount of water that's come from the upper stream of the Zambezi River. And normally it's end of the January or early February. A certain a good amount of water, both in terms of water quality and quantity, that is really needed for all the shrimps to be able to spawning. It's exactly the spawning season. If the water changed, in the river system, come to the exterior area, significantly changed, and that will affect the shrimp spawning activity. That's a disaster, for the shrimp production. That is a disaster for the livelihood of those fishery communities. So this is exactly one of the examples how through the works on the environmental flows can really to ensure the connectivity from the freshwater system to the coastal marine ecosystems. And certainly FAO also tried to address that issue from, for example, in the JAF8, FAO secured the funding from JAF8 to contribute to the clean and healthy oceans, try to address the pollution issues, and recognizing that 80% of the oceans to the oceans really come from the upper river systems, and that's include the pollutant from the cities, from the villages, towns, but also we have to be frank that agriculture is also contribute to that pollutant load, especially the unsustainable use of fertilizers and pesticides. So through this JEF8 project, FAO is also working with the member countries to address how we can really address the ocean pollution issues from the source area, where that agriculture can play a positive role. In addition to that, recognizing the climate impact and the challenges, and especially, for example, last year we see here in Europe, it experienced the drought of 500 years of frequency. And so with that in mind, we started to look at how we can prepare the countries and much more climate uncertain or climate much drier climate future. So we are starting a global mapping of irrigation need and the potentials, so as to help the countries to look at how we can prepare the communities, the agricultures in facing the potential climate change in the future, especially in Africa. We basically talk about Africa, the agriculture, the irrigation water use for agriculture. Africa only account for 3%. So certainly we think through such a systematic mapping that will help us to understand both the need and the potentials, so as to advocate for much more climate financing to get those communities better prepared. Similarly, we will also look at the flooding impacts on agriculture and rural development through a mapping of the major countries that are facing the flood risks, and that information will certainly contribute to the countries to develop their NARPs and NDCs in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Lee. So if you don't have any other questions from the floor, I would like to wrap up a little bit what we have discussed today. First, one element that was raised during this discussion was that climate change affects people because affects water. Tim was very clear on that. Water crisis affect many aspects of our life because climate change affects nature, biodiversity, and so consequently our livelihood. Second aspect, it's true we need to save water, but we can do only if we have a good efficiently use of water. So, and we need more water, but more we need a good management of this water. And David was clear on that. And we can do this only if we work together. I was impressed about the two examples at the beginning from our presenters, how the partnership has a key role on doing that. And I was impressed about the example of Costa Rica and Nepal and Bangladesh, because they are three countries that are very acknowledge from the beginning the role of and the impact of climate change in nature, in biodiversity, and the importance of having water. In Bangladesh, let me acknowledge one person, the Professor Salim Ak, who passed away 3 months ago, who was very inspired and worked a lot in Bangladesh to have this kind of work and to increase the partnerships between all the actors, not only working with, he worked not only with the government, but he involved also civil society, using the participatory approaches to this kind of work. Other element, we can learn from many people. We can learn from many actors. This is the key element also in this discussion. Partnership was one element, and we can learn from indigenous peoples, we can learn from government, we can learn from civil society, NGOs that are the key people in contact with who are the most vulnerable people impacted by climate change. And research. Research is important, but without knowledge and data sharing, doesn't mean anything. And having tools like what Samantha explained today is important because they are accessible for many people, to all of us. So, and we can learn a lot by what others are doing. Fifth element is finance. Of course, we cannot do anything without money, let me say. And this is why we need to increase finance to prevent the cost of climate change and to prevent the cost of reducing of water. And this is another element that I would like to raise in this discussion. So thank you very much for our speakers. Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, David. Thank you very much, Virgin, for your support. And thank you very much, team Amanda and John. And thank you very much for all of you for your discussions. Thank you.